The cold metal of the for sale sign felt like a brand against my fingertips. It was a deep, blood red, a garish wound against the soft green of our mother's prize-winning lawn. Pending sale, a smaller sign boasted beneath it, a final, brutal twist of the knife. I hadn't known. No one had told me. My own childhood home, the house where every memory of my mother lived and breathed, was being sold out from under me by my own sister. My hands were shaking, not from the autumn chill, but from a rage so pure and cold it felt like ice water flooding my veins. This wasn't just a house. It was the last piece of our mother, and Clara was erasing it. 6 months earlier, the world had been a different color. It was the muted gray of hospital waiting rooms and the sickly yellow of fluorescent lights. When Mom passed, it wasn't a long, drawn-out battle. It was a sudden, violent tearing of the fabric of our lives, an aneurysm that stole her from us between one heartbeat and the next. In the disorienting fog of grief, my older sister Clara became my anchor. "Don't you worry about a thing, Ames," she had said, her hand firm on my shoulder. We were in Mom's kitchen, the scent of lavender and old books still clinging to the air. Clara, ever the pragmatist, had already pulled out a notepad. "I'll handle the estate, the lawyers, the bills, all of it. You just focus on grieving." I'd nodded, grateful. Clara was a financial planner, a woman who lived in a world of spreadsheets and 5-year plans. I was a landscape designer, a woman who lived in a world of soil and seasons. It made sense. She was the head, I was the heart. It had always been that way. I trusted her implicitly. My grief was a vast, chaotic ocean, and I was drowning. The last thing I wanted to do was navigate the treacherous currents of probate court and tax forms. "The house," I whispered, looking out the window at the magnificent oak tree Mom had planted the year I was born. "We'll keep it in the family, of course," Clara said, her voice a comforting balm. "We'll sort it all out when the time is right. It's our home, Amelia." I believed her. I clung to that promise like a life raft. The house wasn't just brick and mortar. It was a living archive of our family. I could still see Mom's flour-dusted fingerprints on the worn cover of her favorite cookbook, hear the ghost of her laughter echoing in the hallway, feel the warmth of the sun on the specific spot on the living room floor where she used to do her morning stretches. Selling it felt like a second death, a final erasure of her existence. Clara understood that. Of course, she did. The first few months were a blur of shared sorrow. We cleaned out closets together, our laughter mixing with tears as we found old photographs and ridiculous high school memorabilia. We divided the small, personal things. I took Mom's collection of gardening books and her favorite ceramic bird bath. Clara took the fine china and the antique silver. It seemed fair, practical. She was the one who hosted elaborate dinner parties. I was the one who talked to plants. But then, small things started to feel off. It began subtly, a faint, discordant note in the symphony of our shared grief. I went to the house one afternoon to retrieve Mom's pearl necklace, the one she'd promised me for my wedding day, whenever that might be. I searched her jewelry box, the velvet lining worn soft with time, but it wasn't there. Clara said over the phone, her voice distracted, the sound of typing clicking in the background. "Mom sold that years ago, sweetie, to help pay for that new roof." I didn't. I remembered Mom deliberating over shingle colors for weeks, but I had no memory of her ever mentioning selling her most cherished possession. It was the necklace our father had given her on their first anniversary. She'd sooner have sold a kidney. But I pushed the thought away. Grief plays tricks on the memory. Clara was the one with the clear head. I was just the emotional one. The dissonance grew louder a few weeks later. I was trying to get copies of some old family tax documents for a home loan I was applying for with my partner, Mark. Our accountant needed them. I called Clara, who, as the executor of the estate, had everything filed away. "Oh, Ames, I'm so swamped," she sighed, a familiar note of martyrdom in her voice. "Everything is such a mess. You have no idea what it takes to untangle someone's life. Let me see what I can find." Days turned into a week, then 2. My polite follow-up texts were met with short, clipped replies. Finally frustrated, I decided to go through the online county records myself, just to get a property tax statement. That's when I saw it, a document filed 2 months prior. A home equity line of credit taken out against our mother's house. A house that was owned, free, and clear. The loan was for $150,000. The borrower was listed as the estate of Eleanor Vance, but the signature at the bottom was crystal clear. Clara Vance, executor. My heart hammered against my ribs. A line of credit? Why? The estate had assets. Mom had been frugal. Her retirement accounts were healthy. There was no need to borrow against the house. I called her immediately, my voice tighter than I intended. "Clara? I was on the county website, and I saw a HELOC was taken out on the house." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line, a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. "Legal fees, Amelia," she finally said, her tone sharp, defensive. "And repairs. The furnace was about to go. The plumbing is a nightmare. This stuff costs money. I'm handling it." The question hung in the air, accusatory and raw. "You have no idea what things cost," she snapped. "You live in your little world of flowers and dirt. I live in the real world. I am trying to protect our mother's legacy, and all you can do is second-guess me." The conversation ended with me apologizing. She had a way of twisting things, of making my valid questions sound like childish accusations, of painting my concern as a personal attack on her competence. She made me feel small, ungrateful. She was the responsible one after all. I was just the sensitive one, too emotional to understand the complexities of the real world. And so, once again, I buried my unease under a layer of misplaced guilt. The true gut-wrenching betrayal came not from a financial document, but from a conversation over coffee with our Aunt Carol, Mom's younger sister. We'd met at a cafe downtown, the air thick with the smell of roasted coffee beans and pastries. I'd been looking forward to it, a chance to connect with someone else who was grieving Mom. "You're looking well, dear," she said, her eyes filled with the pity that I didn't understand. "It's been tough," I admitted, "but Mark has been a rock." She stirred her latte, her gaze fixed on the swirling foam. "I'm glad you have Mark. Clara worries so much about you. She says you're, well, not coping well, that you're having trouble accepting things." The ceramic mug felt slick in my hands. "Unstable?" "She said you've been making strange accusations," Carol continued, her voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. "About money and about your mother's things. She thinks you're creating fantasies to avoid the reality of the loss. She just wants what's best for you, Amelia." I stared at her, the blood draining from my face. It all clicked into place, the pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was solving. The dismissiveness, the gaslighting, the narrative she was spinning. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. She wasn't just siphoning assets. She was siphoning my credibility, rewriting our family history with me cast as the unhinged, grieving child, and her as the long-suffering, capable saint. She was isolating me, ensuring that if I ever did speak up, no one would believe me. The betrayal was so profound, so utterly monstrous, it stole the air from my lungs. My sister wasn't protecting me from the messy details. She was the messy detail. I left that cafe in a daze, the world tilting on its axis. The trust I had placed in her, so complete and unconditional, shattered into a million pieces. I drove, not home to Mark, but to the one place that felt like a sanctuary, Mom's house. I let myself in with the key I still kept, the silence of the empty rooms pressing in on me. I walked through the familiar spaces, touching the furniture, running my hand along the worn floral wallpaper in the hallway. This was my history. This was my truth. And she was trying to steal it. I needed proof. Not just a gut feeling or a confusing financial document, but something undeniable. Something that couldn't be twisted or explained away by her slick, corporate doublespeak. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I had to find it. My mind raced. Where would Mom keep something important? Not in the obvious places, not in her desk or the filing cabinet. Clara would have scoured those. Mom was sentimental, but she was also private. She had her secrets, her hidden corners. My eyes landed on the narrow, pull-down staircase that led to the attic. We hadn't been up there in years. It was a dusty, forgotten world of Christmas decorations and old-school projects. Clara, with her allergies and her aversion to anything that wasn't sanitized and organized, would have avoided it. It was perfect. The air in the attic was thick and still, smelling of cedar wood and time itself. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light from a dormer window. I moved past boxes of old photo albums and stacks of my father's forgotten records. In the far corner, tucked under a collection of moth-eaten blankets, was our grandmother's old cedar chest. I ran my hand over the dark, ornate wood. The hinges groaned in protest as I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, the familiar scent of lavender and cedar washed over me. It was filled with the expected things. My baby blanket, Clara's first ballet slippers, a box of our childhood drawings. I started carefully lifting things out, my heart pounding with a strange mix of hope and dread. My fingers brushed against something hard at the very bottom, beneath a false floor I never knew existed. I pried at the thin plank of wood, and it lifted away, revealing a shallow, hidden compartment. And there, tied together with a faded blue ribbon, was a stack of letters, written in our mother's elegant, looping script. My breath caught in my throat. They were addressed to herself. They were her journals, her unsent thoughts, her private truths. My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon. The first few were from when she was a young woman, full of dreams and anxieties about marrying our father. But the last 3 were dated just a year before she died. I sank onto the dusty floorboards, the single beam of light illuminating the pages. I began to read. January the 12th. The first one started. Clara came over today. We had a lovely lunch, but there's a hardness in her I worry about. She sees the world in terms of assets and liabilities. I know she means well, that she wants to be helpful, but it feels predatory. She looks at this house, this home I've poured my soul into, and I feel like she just sees its market value. I had to stop. a sob catching in my chest. Mom had seen it. She had felt it too. I wasn't crazy. I picked up the second letter, my eyes scanning the page hungrily. April 5th, a conversation with Amelia today that soothed my soul. She was helping me in the garden, her hands covered in dirt, and she was talking about the heritage roses and how we could propagate them. She understands that a legacy isn't about money. It's about the living things you leave behind, the beauty you nurture. I have made a decision. I am writing a personal letter of instruction to be kept with my will. The lawyers can handle the finances, but I need my daughters to understand my heart. The house is for both of them. If they choose to sell, it must be a joint decision, made from a place of love, not convenience. The pearls are for Amelia. She has my sentimentality. The silver is for Clara. She has my pragmatism. It must be fair. Above all, it must be fair. There it was, in her own handwriting. The pearls, the house, her intentions clear as day. My sister wasn't just being opportunistic. She was actively defying our mother's most sacred wishes. She was spitting on her memory for a down payment on a new life. The final letter was the one that broke me. July 22nd. I feel a strange premonition lately, a sense of time running short. Maybe it's just age. My greatest fear is not death, but that my girls will lose each other after I'm gone. Clara's ambition worries me, and Amelia's trustfulness makes her vulnerable. They are two halves of a whole, but they see the world through such different windows. If I could leave them with one thing, it would be the understanding that their bond is the most valuable inheritance I can give them. More than the house, more than the money. Tears streamed down my face, dripping onto the brittle paper. The grief I felt was no longer just for my mother. It was for my sister too, or for the sister I thought I had, the one I had loved and trusted. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had betrayed the very core of our mother's last wish. The weight of those letters in my lap was immense. This was it. This was the proof. But what was I supposed to do with it? Storm into her office, waving the pages in her face? Scream at her? The thought of that kind of confrontation made my stomach churn. That was Clara's world, the world of loud, aggressive tactics. Vengeance felt easy. It was a hot, satisfying fire that I longed to unleash. But justice felt different. It was colder, clearer. It wasn't about destroying Clara. It was about honoring our mother. It was about reclaiming the truth she had tried so desperately to bury. I folded the letters, tucked them safely inside my jacket, and walked out of that attic, not as a grieving daughter, but as a quiet, determined soldier, armed with my mother's words as my shield and her truth as my sword. The silent power play was about to meet its match. Back home, with the letters laid out on my coffee table like sacred texts, a cold clarity settled over me. Mark sat beside me, his hand a warm, steady presence on my back, as I told him everything: the HELOC, Aunt Carol's words, and the discovery in the attic. He didn't interrupt, his expression hardening from concern to quiet fury on my behalf. He asked when I finished, his voice low. "Do we call a lawyer?" "Not yet," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Clara's built a fortress of lies. If I just charge at it, she'll paint me as the hysterical, emotional sister, just like she planned. She's a financial planner. She knows how to manipulate systems, how to make paper trails look legitimate. I can't beat her at her own game by playing it her way. My way was patient. My way was thorough. It was the way I planned a garden, by understanding the soil, studying the light, and knowing exactly where to place each element for maximum effect. For the next 3 weeks, I became a different person. The landscape designer was replaced by a forensic archivist of my own family's life. My first stop was the bank. Armed with a copy of Mom's death certificate and the legal document naming me as a beneficiary of the estate, I requested a meeting with the branch manager. I explained calmly and rationally that I had some concerns about the management of my mother's estate and needed to see all recent activity. The manager was hesitant at first, but my prepared paperwork and quiet persistence wore him down. The printouts he gave me told a sickening story. The $150,000 from the HELOC hadn't gone to lawyers or a new furnace. It had been transferred in a series of clean digital transactions to a holding company. I didn't recognize the name, but a quick search on my phone in the bank's lobby revealed the truth. The company was registered to one person, Clara's fiancé, a real estate developer named Richard. She hadn't just borrowed against our home, she had laundered the money through her partner's business. It was a down payment for their own real estate venture, funded by the legacy she was supposed to be protecting. I made copies of every single statement. Next, I tackled the pearls. I found a photograph of my mother wearing them at a family wedding just 2 years earlier. It was a clear, high-resolution shot. I took it to a respected estate jeweler in the city, a man who had worked with my mother's family for decades. "Ah, yes, the Vance pearls," Mr. Abernathy said, peering at the photo through his loupe. "A magnificent double strand of Akoya. Your grandmother brought them back from Japan in the 40s. He shuffled through a meticulously kept filing cabinet. "Here we are." My breath hitched. Mr. Abernathy raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Eleanor loved those pearls more than the roof itself. That seems highly unlikely. In fact, I spoke with her the month before she passed." Another lie, methodically dismantled. I asked him for a signed copy of the appraisal, and he was happy to provide it. The final piece was the house itself. I knew I couldn't stop a pending sale on my own. I needed leverage, and I needed an advocate, but not a pit bull litigator. That would only escalate things into a war that would drain the estate and destroy what was left of our family. I thought of my mother's last letter, her plea for her daughters to find a way to take care of each other. I thought about her friends, the people who had truly known her. That's when I remembered David Chen. David was a family friend, a man who had gone to college with my dad and had stayed close with my mom after he passed. He was a lawyer, but he specialized in family mediation. He was known for his calm demeanor and his almost zen-like ability to find common ground in the most hostile of situations. He was exactly the kind of person my mother would have trusted. I called him, my heart in my throat. I laid out the story, my voice shaking at first, then growing stronger as I recited the facts I had uncovered. "Amelia," he said when I was done, his voice full of a gentle gravity. "I am so deeply sorry this is happening." "I know," I whispered. "David, I don't want to destroy her. I don't want to press criminal charges or drag our family name through the mud. I want what's right." "Understanding, not annihilation," he said, as if reading my mind. "A worthy goal. All right, here's what we do. We request a formal mediation. Just the three of us. You, me, and Clara. No other lawyers present, at least for the first meeting. We present it as a simple necessity to finalize the estate. She will if she thinks she's in control, David said. Her narrative is that you're unstable and confused. A mediation, in her mind, will be the perfect venue to manage you and get you to sign off on everything. She'll walk right into it. 2 days later, the meeting was set. Clara's email to me was dripping with condescension. Ames, David Chen suggested we all meet to go over the final details of the estate. I think it's a great idea, so we can clear up any confusion you might have. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my darkened living room, the file I had assembled on the table in front of me, the bank statements, the appraisal, and the copies of my mother's letters. This wasn't just a collection of documents. It was a monument to my sister's betrayal. I felt a surge of hot, white anger, the desire to see her humiliated, to see her perfect, curated life crumble. But then I looked at the letters, at my mother's flowing handwriting, and I heard her voice, her plea for her daughters. My path wasn't about burning Clara's world to the ground. It was about quietly, methodically, and respectfully taking back what was mine, my inheritance, my memories, and my own sanity. I was going to turn the tables, not by flipping them over in a rage, but by calmly and deliberately setting them right. David's office was on the 24th floor of a downtown skyscraper, a sterile world of glass, chrome, and muted gray carpet. The view of the city was spectacular, a sprawling, indifferent metropolis that made our family drama feel both insignificant and intensely personal. I arrived 10 minutes early, my file clutched in my hands like a shield. Clara swept in precisely on time, looking every inch the powerful executive in a sharp navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, immaculate bun. She exuded an aura of confidence and mild irritation, as if this meeting were an annoying but necessary errand. "Amelia," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She gave me a perfunctory air kiss that smelled of expensive perfume and deceit. "Glad we could finally do this." She nodded at him, a clear signal that she was the one in charge here. We sat around a large, polished mahogany table. I placed my simple manila folder on the table in front of me. Clara placed her sleek leather briefcase beside her, clicking it open with an air of importance. "So?" Clara began, addressing David but looking at me. "As executor, I've worked to consolidate and manage Mom's assets to prepare the estate for final distribution. It's been a monumental task. The house required significant unforeseen repairs, and the legal costs were substantial." She slid a perfectly organized binder across the table. "It's all in here, every receipt, every invoice." David didn't open the binder. He simply folded his hands and looked at her. Clara's smile tightened. "Of course. Any little questions you have, Ames, I'm happy to answer." This was my moment. The anger I had felt the night before was gone, replaced by a strange, icy calm. I opened my folder. I didn't look at her. I looked at the papers, at the facts. "I have a few questions, yes," I said, my voice even. "The first is about the home equity line of credit. You said it was for repairs and legal fees." I slid the first document across the table. It showed the $150,000 withdrawal. I slid a second sheet of paper over. "A company registered to your fiancé, Richard." Clara's face went rigid. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving 2 faint spots of rouge standing out like tiny bruises. For the first time, her composure cracked. That's a temporary holding account. For liquidity? I asked, my voice still quiet, still devoid of accusation. It was a simple question. Her jaw clenched. I have no idea what you're talking about. Perhaps, I said, moving to the next document. I was also confused about Mom's pearl necklace. I pushed the photo of our mother wearing the pearls toward her. This was taken 2 years ago. I took it to Mr. Abernathy, the family jeweler. I slid the signed appraisal for $32,000 across the table. He also mentioned that Mom had spoken to him about having it restrung for me just a month before she died. Clara stared at the papers, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the table. She looked from the appraisal to my face, her eyes narrowing with a venomous fury. The mask of the patient, long-suffering sister was gone. In its place was a cornered animal. She hissed, "You've been sneaking around, spying on me, after everything I've done for this family?" "I'm not trying to thank you or to attack you, Clara," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I'm trying to understand the truth." And then I reached for the last items in my folder. The copies of our mother's letters. I placed the first letter on the table. The one where Mom wrote about Clara seeing the house only for its market value. I didn't read it aloud. I just let her see the familiar handwriting. I watched as her eyes scanned the first few lines, a flicker of recognition, then horror dawning on her face. She whispered, her voice barely audible. "She left them for us," I said, which was true in a way. She left her truth. I slid the final letter, the letter of instruction, to the center of the table. David leaned forward and read the key passage aloud, his voice calm and steady, cutting through the thick tension in the room. "The house is for both of them. If they choose to sell, it must be a joint decision, made from a place of love, not convenience. The pearls are for Amelia. It must be fair." Silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. Clara stared at the letter, at our mother's words, at the undeniable, untainted truth. The intricate web of lies she had so carefully woven over the past 6 months had just been vaporized by a few sheets of old stationery. She finally looked up at me, and her face was a ruin. The anger was gone, replaced by a raw, ugly agony. A single tear traced a path through her perfect makeup. "You don't understand," she choked out, her voice breaking. "I was the one who was here. I was the one who took her to all the doctor's appointments. I was the one who managed her bills when she started getting forgetful. I balanced her checkbook. I dealt with her insurance. I was the responsible one. You were off living your life, playing in the dirt. I earned it. I deserved more. It wasn't fair that it was just an even split." There it was, the festering resentment she'd been carrying for years, the bitter belief that her practicality was more valuable than my emotional support, that her sacrifice was the only one that counted. She truly believed her own narrative, not just the lies she told others, but the ones she told herself. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel the sweet satisfaction of revenge. I just felt a profound, bottomless sadness. Sadness for my mother, for the sister I had lost, and for the beautiful thing our family was supposed to be. David let the silence hang for a long moment before he spoke, his tone gentle but firm. "Clara, What you've done is legally defined as fraud and embezzlement from an estate. Amelia has every right to press charges. The sale of the house would be frozen, your assets would be investigated, and you could face severe consequences, both financially and legally. He let that sink in. He let her stare into the abyss she had dug for herself. However, he continued, looking at me, that is not what Amelia wants. I shook my head, meeting my sister's terrified, tear-filled gaze for the first time. No, I said softly. I don't want that. I just want what Mom wanted. And so, in that sterile conference room, overlooking a city that didn't care, we hammered out the terms of our new reality. It wasn't a negotiation, it was a surrender. The house sale was to be canceled immediately. The $150,000 plus interest was to be returned to the estate account from Richard's company within 72 hours. Clara would pay all associated legal and bank fees out of her own pocket. An independent appraiser would be hired to value the house, and Clara would buy out my 50% share at full market value. She would also pay me the appraised value of the pearls. She would sign a document drafted by David, cede in all executor duties to a neutral third-party attorney to finalize the estate. She agreed to everything without a fight. The fire had gone out of her. She just sat there, small and broken, nodding as David dictated the terms. When it was over, she packed her leather briefcase, her movements stiff and robotic. She wouldn't look at me. "Clara," I said as she reached the door. She stopped, her back still to me. I asked, the one question the documents couldn't answer. "Why not just talk to me?" She turned, and her face was a mask of exhausted bitterness. "Because it was easier," she said, her voice flat and dead. It was easier than admitting I was jealous. It was easier than admitting I felt like Mom never saw what I did for her as love, only as a duty. She respected my competence. It's not the same thing. And with that, she walked out, leaving me alone in the quiet room with the wreckage of our sisterhood. I had won. I had gotten justice, but it felt astonishingly like loss. The weeks that followed were a blur of antiseptic transactions. Money was wired, papers were signed, and the third-party lawyer sent crisp, impersonal updates. Clara and I didn't speak. A chasm had opened between us, too wide and too deep to ever be crossed. She got to keep the house, our childhood home, but I knew it would never feel like a home to her again. It would be a monument to her deceit, haunted by the ghost of our mother's disappointment. With my share of the inheritance, I did two things. First, Mark and I bought a small house of our own, a little cottage with a 1/4 acre of neglected land that was begging to be turned into a garden. It was a place for people to connect, to get their hands in the dirt, to nurture living things. It felt like the right way to honor her legacy, not by hoarding it, but by sharing it. I kept the original copies of my mother's letters. I keep them in a beautiful cherry wood box on my desk, and sometimes, late at night, I take them out and read them. They are a reminder of her love, but also a reminder of how easily things can be broken. One sunny Saturday in the following spring, I was on my knees in my new garden, planting heritage rose bushes propagated from the cuttings I'd taken from Mom's garden before the house was signed over. My hands were covered in rich, dark soil, and the sun was warm on my back. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long, long time. It wasn't a triumphant, fist-pumping victory, but a quiet, settled sense of closure. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. The pearls were in my safety deposit box. It was from Clara. There was no apology, no explanation, just a simple statement of fact. It wasn't an olive branch, not really. It was just one last loose end being tied up. A final, transactional piece of our fractured story. I looked at the text for a long moment, then slipped the phone back into my pocket. I picked up my trowel and dug it deep into the earth. I had the pearls. I had my home. I had my mother's true legacy blooming all around me. I had lost a sister, but in the process, I had found a quiet strength I never knew I possessed. I had reclaimed my own story, and I would spend the rest of my life making sure it was one my mother would be proud of.